everybody.
Hello, hello.
I have my,
Yeah, back to
monogrammed.
your CLC polo.
You know what it is? I didn't want to iron my shirt last night, and this is one of the few shirts I don't have to iron.
Those are nice.
Yeah.
I like those.
I have two,
Yes.
and otherwise I'm ironing every night before I go to bed. And sometimes Rachel's like, "Can you iron something for me?" And the answer is always yes. But last night I was so tired. I'm like, it's uniform shirt day, and it's nylon, so like you can't iron it. So
You're all set.
I'm all set.
Yes. Yes.
And I had an early morning because it's Thursday, and some of you know I'm part of Rotary Club, and they have a 7 a.m. meeting, so I was up early to get to that.
Ready to roll there.
Yeah, so it was all those things. So it was uniform shirt day, and but that is a piece of cake compared to Wednesday at Community Lutheran Church.
That was something else.
It was something else. We have talked around the edges over the past couple of years about the sound system in the sanctuary.
Mentioning, yes, we do need to do a sound.
We started having serious occasional issues during the pandemic where it would go to white noise. Remember the white noise issue? In the sanctuary during the online only, because we were closed, and you didn't hear it at home, but we thought maybe you did. But it was like it was like jet engine loud.
It was loud. Yes.
And our tech team did some digging, and they essentially disconnected something that should work, but it didn't. And so we eliminated a redundancy for the sound to work, and we just said, okay, that doesn't apply anymore. Then in the past year, the sound system would start popping, and we'd lose all control of volume and something called gain, which can cause feedback. And it would only happen occasionally, and every Sunday we'd cross our fingers.
Yeah.
And the later in the morning it got, the worse it became, which means 11 a.m. worship usually got the brunt of it.
It seemed to fail more often than not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we're like, we know, and we even said this is going to be the year that we're going to tackle this project. Like internally, we just said, we know this year's the year. Because it's going to be expensive.
And we pushed it as far as we could. Yeah.
And so yesterday, one of the components of our sound system actually caught fire.
Fried.
It fried. No damage in the building.
Yeah,
It just
it didn't there was no explosion,
No.
but they walked up there and
Had a little-
they could smell the
the blue smoke, as they say.
Yes. Yes.
And noon worship, if you attended or watched online, was full of problems. I don't mean one, continual. And I equate this piece of equipment, if the sound system was a human being, the entire neurological system shut down.
Yeah.
And it would be like removing the spinal cord, right? Like
Yeah,
where
we were done.
Yeah.
Yes, that was its final last gasp.
Yes. And so we made it through the noon service with lots of audio issues, distracting audio issues. And between noon and 6, tech team cobbled together a temporary solution just for 6 p.m.
Which is what they like to do on Valentine's Day.
That's their favorite thing
It's
to
their
do.
favorite thing to do on Valentine's
right.
Day is
That's right.
cobble together
A sound system.
sound system.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we checked one of their boxes. It was
Yeah.
just great.
Yeah. It was like a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. But what worked on Wednesday night won't work for the complexity of Sunday morning.
So yeah, they had to get it all set and then
Tear it apart again.
Tear it apart and go back for more.
So currently we are in the process of renting and borrowing equipment for the short term. Because it doesn't just affect the sanctuary itself, it affects online viewership. It's all tied together. So this is something that affects you guys at home. If you stay at home on Sunday, it affects the room, everything. So we knew it was going to happen. We didn't know it would happen on Ash Wednesday. But I would take that over Holy Week any day of the week.
No, it's that reminder that this is one that we did let it push it as far as we could take it.
That's right.
But it is clear that it is now complete, and it has completed its journey.
Yep.
And
Yes, well done, good and faithful servant.
yes,
And, you know, it may need a special niche in the columbarium. I'm not sure yet. Like,
Yeah.
that's what this thing is done, right?
but it is done.
So here's the thing, and I'm actually putting something in the newsletter about it, but since we're talking about it. So in 2005, when this system was state-of-the-art, and systems were what they called unified systems, meaning every piece of the system spoke the same computer language. That's not the case in 2024, but back then it was. So when a component dies, you have to replace like for like because it speaks the same language. Well, the system's obsolete,
Yes.
which means the best you could do would be look for another 20-year-old piece of equipment
That,
that-
you can scavenge.
that
from
you can
somewhere.
scavenge from some, and it is the neurological system. So I'm not sure looking for a 20-year-old piece of equipment,
Is the best use of anybody's
No.
time or money.
considering and it's going to be expensive because finding used obsolete equipment is not a cheap thing, right?
Yes.
And on top of that, everything else has also shown its age in different and smaller ways.
right, we'd be pouring money into the thing, and then more is going to fail.
More is going to fail, including we're having to use 20-year-old computers to speak that language for other parts of the sound system. We've had to buy and scavenge 20-year-old computers. Last year we had a computer go out, and we overnight had to go find a new computer, not a new computer, an old computer that would work with our software because the language is obsolete. So we've band-aided a lot. Well, we're there now, right? So what we're going to try to do as soon as we can is ask for everybody's help because it's going to take about $60,000 to replace the pieces. No speakers, those are fine. Amplifiers, fine. Our microphones, fine. This is just all the parts that get to the speakers,
The brain.
the brain. And the good news is no more obsolete computer language, meaning in the future when a piece dies, you can just replace that piece. You know, one
Handy.
component, right? So short term, a little painful because we got to fundraise for that. But in the long run, we can replace pieces without, no, it's not a unified system. It's not proprietary. We can mix and match. So I put all that in the newsletter for tomorrow that goes out Friday morning, but it's just something we got to take care of. And if we had a ton of money in reserve, we could just go and do it, but we don't. So we got to fundraise for it.
Yeah, and we didn't want to see it. We wanted it to hold on a little bit longer, but we knew this was coming.
We
and
did.
So we're going to be prepared. I know we have a few things that are rolling to start.
Yep. Matter of fact,
the
yesterday,
fundraising process and-
matter of fact, yesterday we had a homebound couple, longtime members, visiting them between services. I'm not going to say their name, and they gave us money for the sound system yesterday.
So it has kicked off.
It has kicked off. We have
Yes.
received our first official gift from a family that watches online because of health issues, and they said to me, you know, whatever it's going to take, we want to be a part of the solution, and so
That's where it all ties together because
Yep.
it does, like having good sound there. I mean, it's needed for
yeah,
reaching out to our community
that's right.
at home, and that I love hearing from them too because that is so important to reach out to
And
all of
and I
all
just
the people
because they were asking me what's going on, so I explained this is what happened in the last hour,
yeah.
and they said, well, we want to help. I didn't say, you know, you have to give. They just said we want to help.
Yeah.
And they did. And so we've already set up a designated fund today to put sound system money in its own little account. so that we can start fundraising. And if it means it's going to take a while, at a certain point we might be able to buy one piece and keep adding to it if we need to. But it is something we have to take care of and jump into. And it's not necessarily something that you don't ever want to be forced to do something, even if you know it's coming. You just hate when it confronts you, right? Yeah. So, you know what? We're just going to do the best we can. We're going to enlist.
It does make it
help.
very clear, though. This needs to get done.
Yep. Because we'd hate to have to stop broadcasting Sunday morning. Like, we can do this. This is a different system down here, which is newer. But you'd hate to have to say, oh, we can only do so much, and if you come, you're gonna have to do this, because if you're in the room, because there's no amplification.
Or just have a bullhorn on everybody.
Yeah. I'd like that. That would be an inexpensive fix. Yeah. Everybody gets a megaphone.
Phil would be all right.
Yeah.
He could play the organ.
The organ would, at least the pipes.
The pipes could
side
be fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we just have to close caption everything online, because because there's nothing getting out to the world. But we'll get there. I'm not worried about this. I'm not concerned about it. God will provide. God will work through each and every one of us to respond to this. God is good. I'm not stressed out about this. I was stressed out yesterday just trying to figure out how to get worship together. But in the long-term scheme, this is something that when we all are moved by God's Spirit in this, the generosity will happen, and we'll get there. So it is what it is. Everything in the building shows its age at some point, and you take care of it, right? So
we're going to take care of this.
So with that, we did step into a new season yesterday, the season of Lent. As I mentioned at worship, it's 1,700 years old this season. First church season ever created on the church calendar. Lent was the first one. And it was primarily, back then, they only did baptisms on the Saturday before Easter, which is called Easter Vigil. And so they would take that time and they would educate, teach the faith to those who were already coming to church but had made the decision to get baptized. And they were called catechumenates. And so they would take this time before Easter Vigil to really teach the faith to these folks who were going to be baptized. And so Lent's formation came out of that, but then it expanded to this time of reflection and getting ready for the death and resurrection of Jesus, to celebrate that and remember that. And so as we step into Lent, we have a video for you to watch to kind of, not only to experience a little bit of where we're headed, but also a little bit of inspiration. So let's take a look at that. It's a way to kind of walk into this season and be,
I think it's important to mark this season.
Yeah.
Like because the world makes it clear once you hit July that Christmas is coming, right?
Yeah,
Like
right,
there are times where
right.
it's just like
Yeah.
the world just makes it clear.
Yeah.
And this is a really meaningful season that if we're not paying attention, it's you can ignore it. You just
Yeah.
kind of life moves on and you're just kind of pushing through.
Yeah.
But that I love how that marked it.
Yeah, and we really are, and I like that thought of we're carving out this time, and maybe people that our neighbors or maybe they don't even know that, but we carve this time out for ourselves, and to be intentional about it, not just on the weekends, but starting yesterday, but all the way through the next 6 weeks on Wednesdays. We'll gather at noon. We'll broadcast worship from the chapel. You can catch it later in the day, or if you want to be present, you can. And to spend that extra time thinking about what Jesus actually did on Good Friday for you, for me, and not think of it just as a historical event.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a part of the context, but also to go, wait a minute. As a broken person, Jesus did something for me I couldn't do for myself. And that is something worthy of reflection, which pushes away this notion of that Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about cheap grace. Now, don't get me wrong, grace is free, but we cheapen it by saying, well, I can do what I want because I'm forgiven. That cheapens the gift.
Yeah.
Gift is free. But when we reflect on the cost of that free gift for us, Jesus' suffering and death, that really illustrates this understanding, and he uses this word, costly grace. It's still free for us, but we measure the cost.
Right, and to me, that's what this season is all about. It's not about hating yourself or all the woe is me and misery. But it's about that reflection of all that God has done.
That's right.
And taking time to remember that, taking time to how am I going to live into this?
That's right. And we spent some time yesterday in worship talking about that, in the sense that if we want that amazing grace for ourselves in its fullness, it takes emptying ourselves to be a vessel to receive all of that amazing grace. That if we are half full of our own junk and our own agenda, then we're only going to get about half of that amazing grace in our life. You know what I'm saying? But when we empty ourselves, and the word we used last night was when we humble ourselves, not woe is me, not I'm not worthy, not that kind of humility, but pointing to God, everything I have is a gift from him. When I can point to Jesus and everything, that's an emptying so that I can receive a fuller measure of grace. Because there's lots of ways that we can reject grace or keep it at bay when our own wants surpass us opening ourselves up. And so we talked a little bit about humility last night and being ready for the season to be filled with that amazing grace. And that's a part of Lent. Is for us, it's not about for show. It's not about, look at me, I'm fasting. I look,
Which people have been doing that for ages. I mean, Jesus talked about those people. Yeah.
He's like, you already got your reward. People noticed
Yeah.
you. Good for you.
Yeah.
But instead, taking that silent journey of reflecting on the gift that we've been given. And there's so many promises associated with that, because the season is not a season of feeling bad, which has been played in many Christian churches over the years. It's Lent, time to feel bad about yourself.
Right. Yeah.
but instead to bask in the grace, knowing, I think this is the contrast with it, knowing I don't deserve any of it. And we heard a song last night that was originally written and recorded by a friend of Philip Fortenberry and Keith Thompson, a Crystal Lewis song. And we actually, this song is so good that even a year ago, we used this song in worship on Ash Wednesday.
It fits so perfectly.
And it is so good that we brought it back, and after a year, it is fresh again, of course. And we used this song during the imposition of ashes, and you'll see why in a moment. But we're going to go to the verse that's full of promise as it relates to beauty for ashes. So let's take a listen, and then we'll talk about it.
He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. When sorrow seems to surround you, when suffering hangs heavy on your head, know that tomorrow brings wholeness and healing. God knows your need, just believe what He says, 'cause He brings beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. When what you've done keeps you from moving on, when fear wants to make itself home in your heart, know that forgiveness brings wholeness and healing. Oh, 'cause God knows your need, just believe what He says. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. I once was lost, but love is found. I've gone bound down, I've been set free. I've been made righteous in His sight. The display of splendor all can see. I once was lost, but God has found. Though I was bound, I've been set free. I've been made righteous in His sight. The display of splendor all can see. Hey, He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for fear, gladness for mourning, peace for despair. He gives peace for despair, peace for despair. He gives peace for despair. He gives peace for despair. Yes, He does.
just love that song.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Everybody in the room was pausing while we were also reliving that moment. Jason, Philip, you, myself, we were just kind of like leaning into the song there.
The whole service had that kind of feel to it, and I really love that.
Yep. And I give thanks that we had Andrew was come and was a guest with us last night from Human Nature.
Yeah,
and Emily was with us, a drummer who was with us on the weekend. And I said at the end of 6 o'clock that Robbie and I spent some time really laying out the flow and the feel of this service, and I appreciated his willingness to let's mold this thing. And if you didn't get to see all of it, it's going to be up on the website soon. We had some tech issues, as you know, yesterday, but we're putting it back up there in its entirety, and it's well worth the journey. And that was happening during the giving of the ashes, which means if you're watching it online, you're not like, well, I'm just twiddling my thumbs until they're done with that and we move on to the next thing.
No, it was great.
There was, some real movement of the Spirit last night in that whole thing. But that song that Crystal Lewis wrote comes from Isaiah 61. And Isaiah 61, the first half of this chapter, to me, is fascinating. Because Isaiah, it's God, but God is speaking through Isaiah, and he's really talking at the very beginning of the chapter of a Jubilee year where everything is reset, forgiven, made new, and that was an Old Testament concept of Jubilee, that the wrongs are righted and the playing field is leveled. And you see that mentioned in the Old Testament law. But in Isaiah, God comes back to it and reframes it in a new way. And it should sound familiar because this is what Jesus read at his hometown synagogue when he was asked to read from anything he wanted, and he chose this. So some of this should sound familiar. But from Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, release from darkness for the prisoners, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. That's that Jubilee talk, resetting the deck, shuffling it up, even playing field. And that's where Jesus ends reading it, and he says, this is fulfilled in your presence today. But that's not where the reading ends. And what I find interesting is that's just verse 1, and Jesus does not read this, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and here's that second part, the day of vengeance for our God. So Jesus stops reading halfway through verse 2. To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, the end. But the sentence wasn't done. And you only can imagine, at least this is how I've made sense of this. Why did he drop off and the day of vengeance for our God? Because Good Friday is the place where God removes that vengeance and that punishment for us. That Jesus, we're not covering that half of the verse because I'm going to nullify it the day I go to the cross.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There is no day of vengeance, that God takes that upon himself for our benefit. So that goes. And then, listen to this. Second half of verse 2 and following. Here's where the song comes. To comfort all who mourn and to provide those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes.
There it is.
The oil of gladness instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And if we embrace this, and I talked about this last year, that if you trust in God with those things, this is what happens. They, but you, will be called an oak of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. That what God wants to do in you will build you up in such a way that you will be as strong as an oak tree, spiritually speaking. And I don't know, have you ever been in the Deep South at all? I'm not going to ask you that question. I know the answer to that.
So when I was a kid, we used to drive from Minnesota to Florida.
Okay.
And but we would primarily be passing through on our way to.
Okay.
Get
So
to
so
Florida.
just outside of New Orleans, Nolens,
Yes.
there is a handful of plantations that are still standing.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one called Oak Alley. You ever heard of Oak Alley, Phil? Yeah. And what's interesting, and the reason it has this name, and of course we disavow slavery and the evils of that, but at this place called Oak Alley, the entrance to the main house along the road are these oak trees that basically canopy the road in. But the history on it is a big question mark because the age of the oak trees predate any farming on that land, plantation house, anything else. That these oaks were intentionally planted on two sides like 300 years ago. And nobody knows who or why they were planted. But they are still standing today. And you could just do a quick Google search and do Oak Alley, and you would see pictures of these line of oaks on both sides of this road leading in. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of that, but yeah. And it is just this amazing, beautiful picture, not of the plantation, but of these trees that have stood through hurricanes and storms and generations of evil and generations of good. And these trees are a mystery, but they're still standing strong from whoever planted them long before there was a place called Oak Alley. And when you hear, if you turn to God, He will take the ashes and the grieving of your heart and turn it into something beautiful. That He will give you a garment of praise, the ability to worship instead of a spirit of despair, right? And in that, if you embrace what God wants to give, you will stand strong like a 300-year-old oak tree. Yeah. And I love that imagery of spiritually strong when we fully rely on God, to use a passage from Lou Meyer.
Yes.
Right?
A great one.
And so I love the fact that these two sets of verses in Isaiah 61, one we're like, oh yeah, Jesus read this at the synagogue when He was visiting home. And then the second part, which often stands by itself, but you put them together and you go, oh, fully rely on God who wants to right the wrongs of this world and also help you in your brokenness and the sore places of your life.
Yeah.
That it's societal, it's personal, and together we become these oaks of righteousness. And I love that.
Oh, I think that's great.
Which is a great way to think about Lent, is, oh, God wants to build me up in this season. And it is punctuated by Good Friday and Easter at the end, right? Now, to get there, we all face trials and temptations. Even in the season that we just started, we're going to be in trials and temptations. And there's a story that, at least in the Lutheran Church, when I was growing up, you get to Ash Wednesday, and most of the time you expect to hear this story.
Yeah.
At least that's within the Lutheran Church that I grew up in. Like, this was kind of like, I don't know if you know this, but on Thanksgiving, the healing of the 10 lepers is usually a Thanksgiving text.
It often shows up on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, not leopards, not with the D, the lepers, right. And this one, which I'm going to have Brian read to you, is often associated with Ash Wednesday, at least within the Lutheran Church. But it says something about we also face trials and temptations. So I'll let you read that.
Yeah, so from Matthew chapter 4. So right after Jesus was baptized, he baptized and then turns and goes out to the wilderness, led by the Spirit, into the desert to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry.
Understatement.
Mm-hmm. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdom of the world and their splendor. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him, and the angels came and attended him.
The temptation of Jesus. I like this version, but at the end of Luke telling this story, Luke writes, the devil left him until an opportune time, right?
Yeah.
Like, in other words, he ain't done yet, nor is he ever done. Like, and the same with us. But you think about that temptation story of Jesus and how he overcomes 3 different temptations common to us.
Right.
And within those things, I never want to have you miss that. Notice the temptation didn't happen until Jesus was vulnerable, right? It wasn't day 1 or day even 20. It was day 40 that the temptation came. Now he was hungry. Now he was weak. Now he was compromised physically. Temptation often happens when we are in a vulnerable or compromised situation. We're hungry, angry, lonely, we're tired. That's when temptation comes. Happens to Jesus exact same way, right?
Yeah.
When we're vulnerable. Now, all these 3 temptations are things that the people of Israel encountered while they were in moving from Egypt of slavery into freedom, into the Promised Land. All 3 of these things Jesus quotes from that journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. So same kind of, we all face temptations. And the first one, you're hungry.
They're hungry, so turn these stones into bread.
Right? The devil's like saying, okay, why don't you serve yourself? Take care of yourself. That's all you need to do. Just serve yourself. And I love the fact that he taunts him, if you're the Son of God. I'm going to tell you in that moment, both the devil and Jesus knew he was the Son of God. But he's needling him. Well, if you're the Son of God, I'm not sure you are. He knows who he is. He wouldn't give him that much attention if he wasn't, right? Yeah. So he's like, be prideful, Jesus. Serve yourself. Take care of yourself. And Jesus is like, it's not just about food. Fulfillment comes from every word that comes from the mouth of God. Which I'm going to talk about fulfillment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I wish you would talk more about fulfillment.
This weekend. Stay tuned,
I'll
folks.
wait then.
That's right. And then he takes him up to the temple, and he's like, throw yourself off if you are the Son of God, right? Once again. And Jesus quotes Psalm 96. If you know that hymn, "And I will lift you up on eagle's wings," comes from the same psalm. And Jesus is like, once again, this is about abuse of power. Wow, God said he, wouldn't let you get hurt. So
and you wouldn't be alone. Like, is God really going to be there for you?
For you,
and yeah, do you either already have that in your heart,
right?
Or, you're going to seek to try to prove it.
He doesn't have to prove it, right?
Yeah.
You just know. And and Jesus says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. God, if you really love me, you would do X. Or God, if you really love me, why did you let this thing happen? Or, we do the same thing. And it's just a reminder, like, nope, just turn to God, because he'll give you beauty for ashes. And that's the thing. And help us endure whatever is to come. And then finally, Satan's like, hey, how about this? It doesn't use if you are the Son of God this time. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay, we're done with that game.
Yeah.
He's like, how about you just bow down and worship me, and I'll just give you everything. And as I've said before, it's not his to give.
Yeah.
But still. And I think that there is, even for us, this illusion of comfort in stuff. You'll find fulfillment or fullness in earthly things. I don't mean just possessions, status, power, money, house, that somehow that there's this, well, if I just have this, I'll be satisfied, right? And Jesus is like, yeah, no, just get out of here, right? Away from me.
Away from me.
And keeps it back to that commandment, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. When he was asked the question, what are the two most important commandments? Love God, love neighbor. Here it is. He said, get away from me. This is about loving God, and I'm going to keep my heart there.
Yeah.
Same temptations. We have the same things.
No, and in the Old Testament, God's people on that journey from Egypt, they fail each one of these.
They fail these.
Yeah, they fail
That's
them.
right.
And we do too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. That we don't turn to God when there's a need. In this case, it was food. We don't turn to God. We turn to our own devices, and kind of like Abraham when he was told he's going to have a kid, and he's like, well, Sarah, you're too old. Let's use your hand. Like, I'll solve the problem, right? We problem solve and don't turn it over to God. And Jesus is like, nope, don't do that. Secondly, don't start to question, not like don't feel like it's a sin in the sense of like, wow, you should never do that. But like, I don't want you to have doubts about God's love and care and concern for you. In other words, don't put him to the test. Be assured of his love and his care for you.
Yeah.
And then, finally, don't get caught up in finding satisfaction in the wrong things, which I will talk about this week in worship.
Yeah.
So another traditional Lenten thing, to think about the temptations that are common to us all. And no one is exempt. And what I've also learned in life is the people who want to harp on other people's sins when it's nunya business, those are the people who are struggling with that very thing. Yeah. I've seen that time and time again. I want to harp on this. You're struggling with it. Yeah. The line, doth protest too loudly? That is often the case. And so instead, if we just deal gracefully with one another, that's where we need to be, the way Jesus dealt with us, and deals with us tenderly and with compassion, and wants to give us beauty for those ashes and those grieving places in our life. So with that, we're glad that you joined us today, and we hope that you have a nice rest of your... Oh, he's moving the camera. It's an earthquake. Thought it was the end of the world. I thought it was the sound system yesterday, but it's the camera work today. I don't know what's going on. No, it's okay, Jason. Don't worry about it. But we hope you have a great rest of your day. Weather's starting to warm up a little bit, which is kind of
Today's
nice.
a really nice day out there.
You notice I have short sleeves on, so... I almost forgot. Before we turned it over, we had the tile installed for our 50th anniversary tile
Super
painting.
fun, yes.
So I don't know if you were a part of that or got to see that, but we invited everybody back in October, November who wanted to paint a tile to go on our wall outside, and that tile was installed yesterday and today. So if you have the ability to come to church, it's on the community lane entrance side, which is really just right above our offices. But that wall had our 25th anniversary tiles. As of today, we have our 50th anniversary tiles.
Yes.
So So kind of exciting. So anyways,
It is
come check that out.
wonderful.
We'll try to put some pictures in the newsletter as well. So anyways, take care. We love you. And Philip, will you play us out?